for coming. We will start the oral arguments in the trial of the state of Mississippi versus Judge Sean Tindall. No, thank you for coming. I'll call up Senate nomination 36, Sean Jeffrey Tindall, to the Commissioner of Department of Public Safety. So, Sean, it's, I guess the way we could, you can come over to the podium. You know where to go. Judge Tindall. So as I announced earlier, the peer report, and I just had a couple things to say. Peer report, we do the background checks and all that, and it is, you know, very, sometimes I question what's in the peer report, and there were some comments made in the peer report that I just, Sean Tindall, Judge Tindall, his strong character, desire to do the right thing, leadership capacity, Joel Smith, and, you know, he responds to tough situations, merely acts, his actions are strength. I don't know who put this stuff in here because that's crazy. So I question the peer report. That's a joke, by the way.
I had to pay them a lot to do that. So I had to pay those folks a lot to put that stuff in there.
Couple of the references there. So no, just to be serious. So this is actually an honor to have this confirmation, and many people know you, Judge Tindall, and so what I wanted to do was turn it over to you, let you address the committee, and see any questions, and we go from there. So.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank the committee members, as well as everybody in all the members of the Senate, for my consideration to this post. It was certainly an honor when I heard from Governor Reeves' office that they were inquiring to know if I'd be interested in such a position. And I'll tell this committee, as I would anybody that asked, I was probably as shocked as anybody. It wasn't a position that I was seeking, and it wasn't anything that I really had contemplated. But when they asked me if I'd be willing to do it, first after getting over the honor of being asked and discussing it with my wife, I started thinking of all the ways that I could get back involved and engage with our state and hopefully work to the benefit of our state. And so I started doing more research, talking to former commissioners, and then those of you that know me know that often I will research and really fully contemplate things before I make a decision, and that's what I did in this case. And while I was concerned about the size of the organization itself, over the last few weeks since my nomination, I can tell you that I've had the opportunity to meet with and work with many great men and women that make up the Department of Public Safety. And I am confident that with their help, as with the legislators' help, we're going to be able to do really good things over there. And so it's an honor to be here. Appreciate it. I think the world of all of you, and we'll do a good job for you, hopefully, as your next commissioner of the Department of Public Safety. One other thing that I'd like to announce, if I could have the opportunity, Colonel Gillard, who has been a member of the Mississippi Highway Patrol for 26 years now, and has served this state in a great capacity as colonel. He's been over the Driver's License Service Bureau at one time. He's also been over the Trooper Academy. He has worked selflessly, I can tell you, and even being the interim commissioner after Commissioner Fisher resigned, has sacrificed many times being away from his family and for the betterment of our state. He will be retiring at the end of the month, and I just want to give him full accolades because I can't tell you a more impressive individual that I've been around than him. And he bleeds blue, but he loves his state, and he loves the people of this state, and should be an inspiration to really a lot of young people coming up from difficult backgrounds as his to do great things. So I just wanted to give him my sincere appreciation.
Well, so for the benefit of the committee, what we'll do, I have a couple questions, and then we'll open it up, and then I think there may be some people who want to, if anybody wants to say a few words and all that. So, Judge, you know where my issues have been on certain issues at DPS, from the medical examiner to the driver's license and things like that. So, those are, I know you maybe have some things that you thought about. You're going to take on those things, right?
Oh, absolutely, and I can tell you anytime that I've met with folks, I tell them, number one, we got to fix driver's license services, and number two is the crime lab and medical examiner's office, getting things back in order there. I've already started, we just opened this week. There's been some long lines. After being closed for 10 weeks, there's really no way to avoid that. All you have to do is remember when Sam's opened back up and lines wrapped around the edge of Sam's. So we've got a backlog, but we're trying to work our way through that. We've come up with some ideas to address that. I've actually got a bid for an appointment system that can come online in September that I'm going to go over with the governor's office today. If we can get that in place, hopefully people can start making appointments to show up. And really, I've tried to take an approach from the top down on customer service. The last 3 days I've been at Driver's License Services Bureau, standing in line with people that are waiting in line, talking to them, listening to them, and hearing their ideas. The other thing that I've done, and I've started putting together, Glenn Mueller, who's owner of one of the largest Domino's franchises in the U.S., has agreed to be on an advisory committee for driver's license services, as has Greg Desher. Their family owns hundreds of McDonald's across the country. I've also talked to Senator Watson and gotten his input, or Secretary of State Watson. He's going to be working with us on this. So I'm trying to bring a team of people together that understand operational management, that also have a passion for fixing driver's license services. And, it's going to be our number one priority. As for the crime lab, I can tell you from my time on the court, time as a prosecutor, I've seen firsthand some of the problems that are starting to happen with the delay in crime lab reports and the effect that it can have on our criminal justice system, primarily the right to a speedy trial that is being lost. And I do think at some point, if we don't get it correct, we'll see for the first time in a long, long time a case that's dismissed because of a lack of a speedy trial, due solely because the crime lab can't turn around its reports in an efficient time. Some of that is a funding issue. We've got to get more people working there, and we got to pay them better. We're losing them to other states. But as I told the heads of those offices, before you let anybody go to another state over money, let me know and see if we can figure out a way to get more money on the table, even in the interim, to try to keep them here, because we just can't be losing them to Louisiana and Alabama and Florida like we have been. So those things are really high on my radar, and things that I intend to address almost immediately.
I think, because I've kind of been involved a little bit on this issue, the good stuff on the driver's license about the online appointments and things, I personally have heard from constituents who just rave about the fact that you can go online, that you can do that, and that's something that got started after this whole situation came to a head. And then the Saturday appointments for the teenagers doing that, people have told me that is like one of the best things that can be done, that is doing. And so, which I know you've probably heard the same stuff.
I have, and there's a peer report that came out at the end of last year that I've read thoroughly, that has a list of recommendations and recommendations and concerns, and it brings up those very things that you just mentioned, particularly the Saturday test for students, and so it's a good thing.
Just to finish that out, I think it's the word I was using and others have used is customer service. At the end of the day, not at the end of the day, but that was probably lacking. I think those things highlight, kind of meeting the public where they are. Does that?
And I agree. And again, I think it's I think some of the people that work at driver's license services were getting frustrated. There's a new computer system, which in the peer report, it highlights that that's part of the problem. Where they used to do 100 people with the new computer system, the time it takes to go through it knocks them down to 55. And so you know, they're getting frustrated because they're having to input a lot more data. People are getting frustrated at them. So we've got to do some things, I think, that help the folks that are working there, whether it's, hey, take a 15-minute break, go to the lounge, play a game on your phone, eat a snack, get your head back before you go out and deal with the public again. Because they've been put in a very, very, very tough situation as well. And, when you're working your tail off and then people are being critical of you, it's kind of like when Jeremy starts yelling at, or Senator England starts yelling at the first baseman on his baseball team, and the kid just breaks down, and it just doesn't behoove anybody. So we got to find a way to get through that and keep their mindset right to where they're not frustrated.
Okay, I'll open it up to questions from the committee. Yes, Senator DeBar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, Senator.
What's the status of the trooper strength? Do we have enough troopers? Do we need more troopers? Are we going to need a school?
We just had an academy that graduated last year. I want to say that we started off with a little over 50 cadets. We ended up with 24 graduating. And part of it's a recruitment problem right now. I mean, we're just not finding as many young people that want to go into law enforcement. So you've got that issue, and then the numbers right now. We just added 24, but I can tell you we'll probably have just about that much retiring this year. So we're going to be right back down to where we were. My idea, and I know I've talked to a number of y'all as well as other people, just doing a trooper school every 4 years, where we watch the numbers dwindle down to a critical level, then we have a trooper school and get them back up, and then they'll dwindle down after 4 years, and then we have another one. I would like to see us go to an annual troopers academy where we're keeping an even flow of troopers out there to help protect the men and women of the state of Mississippi on the roads of Mississippi. And that also includes MBI. And MBI often gets lost in the trooper discussion, but the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, which has about 100 members, does the governor's detail, the lieutenant governor's security detail, as well as the speakers. But they also assist local law enforcement in a variety of investigations, particularly those investigations that involve officer-involved shootings or public officials shootings, such as the judge over in Meridian. So they play a very critical role. And in my thought process, the fact that we only have right now 76 that can be out there assisting in those types of investigations is horribly low, and we need more of those as well.
What's your opinion on, we have troopers working in the driver's license bureau. We've discussed that around this building about getting them back on the road to help plus up the strength. Also, maybe go into a modified academy where you have a certified law enforcement officer who's been trained going to a shorter trooper school to get more manning on the road, I guess.
I think those are all valid points. As for the troopers in the Driver's License Services Bureau, they were doing what was asked of them, and it's been asked of them a long time. And so if we transition away from that, I think it's important that we acknowledge that they've done a good job for many years there, and but that their skill set might be better served not handling driver's license, but being on the road, being at MBI, doing security details, the things that their skill sets are geared towards. And so I appreciate the fact that a lot of them have done great jobs there. Colonel Brown has done excellent. Jay Kelly's done a great job. They understand the system, but they might have a skill set that would better serve the state utilizing that. And then as far as the lower requirements for the trooper school, I certainly think that that's, again, something to consider. I mean, we just talked about the shortage that we have, maybe trying to do an annual program. And as it pertains to, MBI in particular, if we have an opportunity to bring on detectives from local jurisdictions or investigators, as I mentioned to Colonel Morrison, who's the head of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, if you want to be the best, you got to get the best. And so whatever it takes to get those folks in the trooper program and get them as MBI investigators, that's what I want to see happen.
Thank you. I guess I could ask the same question about MBN. It seems like they're undermanned and need more agents and so forth. Is there a concerted effort to maybe recruit some more agents to work MBN, or
They
What-
do, and I can tell you that with MBN, of course, they don't have to be troopers to be an MBN. The troopers can transition over to that, and they do a lot of task force work with local law enforcement. I think part of the problem, from what I understand, is that over the years, federal law enforcement, DEA and ATF, has kind of come in and taken a lot of the MBN folks that were working with smaller local sheriff's departments and dragged them, and not dragged, but we've started doing more affiliations with the federals. I'd like to see us get back to working with the local sheriffs and addressing their drug problems. You live in a small county. Most of my family's from Stone County and Pearl River County, smaller counties. There's a tremendous drug problem in the rural parts of those counties, and all you have to do is talk to somebody that's had their wood splitter stolen like me, or a trailer taken like me. I mean, and it's usually related to some sort of drug issue going on in those communities.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was on Maggie Wade Dixon's page, Channel 3, and there was a video of an encounter with the Highway Patrol and a citizen. Is there any validity to that video? Is there any validity?
Validity to the video. Let me tell you what happened, and I'll give you the backdrop of kind of what was going on. And I've seen the video that you mentioned, and I think when you watch the small version of it, the small clip, it is shocking to see.
I'm sorry, can you pull the microphone
Closer?
There you
Is
go.
that better?
Yeah.
When you see the video, it is shocking to see. So I got it. We looked at it. We started inquiring. Of course, that happened in July of 2019, so that was a while back. The individual that was driving the car was doing 101 miles an hour. He was directed to pull over. Upon being pulled over, it was noticed that there was an unrestrained 3-year-old in the back seat of the car, as well as another passenger. At that time, it was requested that he provide his driver's license. He refused to do that. Upon exit of the vehicle, he still wouldn't provide his driver's license. He was advised that he was getting he had been pulled over for speeding, and kept refusing to follow the officer's commands. And so during the course of that, I want to say there was some 60 commands that were given that he refused to comply with, and there was another 23 direct commands for him to put his hands behind his back. And so when backup finally arrived, he was subdued and taken, put in custody. And so at that point, he was charged with resisting arrest, and he was charged with speeding. And just about 2 weeks ago, he was found guilty of both those charges. There was an internal investigation done, and the officers were absolved of any wrongdoing. I would also note that the individual in the car was on probation for armed bank robbery out of North Alabama, and use of a firearm in bank robbery. And so, all those things considered, and I think it was handled, and as far as I know, he didn't receive any severe injuries during the course of that takedown.
So you were able to look at something from the patrol's body cameras?
I never saw the body cameras. I just saw the video taken by the female that was on the scene, that was also in the car with the individual. And I think there was a version that made the internet, and then there was a full length of version that went on a little bit further.
And I'm sorry, because I think that's important, and you've operated in a DA's office and all that, and to what you just said, there's a whole process that's involved in these cases, is there not? And when I say these cases, I mean, but that goes for every criminal case, from a grand jury and all that. And just like you said, there's what you see on the internet, and then there's all the video. Is that?
That's
You
correct.
want to expand on that?
Well, of course. I mean, and I think anytime there's an allegation that law enforcement might have been using excessive force, of course, there's an internal investigation. If there's ever found to be that in fact there was, it could easily turn into a criminal investigation, and one in which would be presented to a grand jury. I don't think it got to that stage with the officers in this case, but as far as the defendant himself, that also goes through a process which, presents an opportunity for him to defend himself in court if he was unlawfully pulled over, if it was an unconstitutional stop. He has an opportunity to contest that, and then the judge has the opportunity to hear the facts and determine whether or not, in fact, he was speeding and whether or not he resisted arrest. And with the video that was there, The judge in that case made his or her determination.
Thank you. I was asking about body cameras. Are all of the patrolmen required to have body cameras?
No, no.
Is that something that you would be looking at in
Yeah.
order to protect
I
the
think body
patrolmen
cameras.
as well as protecting the citizens?
I think body cameras have proven to be good for everybody. I mean, present the truth right there to you.
Thank you.
Tom?
I have a question, Judge.
Yes, thank you.
It's, I don't know very much about you, but your philosophy, would you kind of elaborate on your philosophy in terms of public safety? And I might ask, what are your intermediate goals? I know your short range, your intermediate, and your long term. What do you bring to the table in terms of helping our state?
Okay. Well, and I haven't had an opportunity to work with you. I wish I would have. Yeah, I think our paths didn't cross as senators as I left a couple of years ago. So my goals, obviously we talked about some of the short term. Long term, looking more towards the future, I would like to expand the role of MBI in our state. I would seek legislation from this body that would require that all officer-involved shootings be investigated by the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. In other words, that when there's a local officer-involved shooting or assault, that the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation is called in immediately to investigate it instead of, the law enforcement agency in which it occurred or a sister law enforcement agency next door. It just gives a greater degree of separation so that we know that there was an independent investigation. So expanding the role of MBI as an agency for the whole state. Then in addition, the Law Enforcement Training Academy. I feel like as it operates now, we can expand that and be a premier law enforcement academy, not only for the state of Mississippi, but across the entire Southeast. And I'd like to see us doing a variety of training for other states, bringing them into our academies and training their law enforcement. And I think the other thing, and you asked what I bring to the table, so to speak, for the Department of Public Safety. I'm not a law enforcement. I'm not sworn law enforcement. I've never taken that career path. I have been a prosecutor, and I have been a judge, so I understand the criminal justice system and what happens to those cases down the road. I want to work with our law enforcement to put them in a position where they're putting together very good, solid case files, and that will either determine whether or not somebody that's been arrested or charged or accused is given a fair investigation, and if they are in fact guilty, that the evidence is there to proceed to trial and find them guilty of such. And so there's that. But it's such a large agency, and it's almost mammoth when you think about it, because you have over 1,100 employees that handle everything from driver's license to doing homeland security. We do a lot of grant work throughout the state. And so we've got all these things that are coming together underneath one umbrella, and it's trying to assure everybody involved that I'm not picking one side or the other. I'm not a narcotics guy. I'm not a highway patrol guy. I'm a Department of Public Safety guy. And I want to see it succeed, and that means that you succeed, and that means that the governor succeeds, and that means that the state of Mississippi succeeds, and that's my goal.
But you plan to be fair, and you plan, regardless of, I think the question I want to ask you, are officers, patrolmen, are they right all the time?
Are they right all the time?
Yeah.
No, nobody. I make mistakes. I'm not right all the time.
Okay.
Nobody's
so
right all the time.
I heard you say bleed blue, so you're not, it's not 100% either way. You're going to be fair to the people of our state.
I think you always have to look at things with an independent view. I think you can. I bleed USM. I'm a Golden Eagle through and through. I love Southern Miss, but I can also be very critical of the decisions that are made there sometimes.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. You've touched on the law enforcement side of it, and we understand the challenges that are there, and certainly not as well as those who line up every day to go out and serve and protect. But I think the backlog, and you touched on the crime lab, but at the misdemeanor level, which is where we're going to have the most contacts, probably, we struggle because I think sometimes we have 82 counties, and that's 82 justice courts with their forms, and municipalities. We have legislation currently working through the system to require the MEC system to be mandated, and that would be more so, I know, for our circuit courts, our felony courts. But is there any possibility that the Department of Public Safety would see that putting out standardized forms that across the state would assist the local court system from having some of the disconnect? Because I know it cannot be beneficial to the Department of Public Safety to receive everybody's self-created form, and in some courts where the judge would say, attorney, you create your own form.
Right. And no, I think that's a great idea. And of course, if the legislators, if we were directed that way, we would do it. If I've got the administrative authority to sit down and start at least even assisting by providing forms, and that's something y'all would like to see us do, I'll put the attorneys on it and we'll work on it. I mean, we've got a good staff of, in my mind, great attorneys that have practiced a variety of types of law, and I think they would be very engaged in that process. I myself, before I became a judge, I'd practiced just about in every court in the state, from city court to justice court to county court, and sometimes I would even be crazy enough to venture off into Forest County or Jackson County and go visit a justice court judge up there, and I was reminded very quickly, it's not a very uniform practice.
For your ID in Jackson, you came over to Jackson.
There's no doubt. They wouldn't let me leave.
And then the second thing, the movement to crimes related to technology. I mean, I know we're MBI, we're deep, we're Highway Patrol, but what are we looking at going forward in participating in trying to combat cyber crime, elder abuse, fraud? We talked about yesterday, and electronic banking crime.
Well, and I saw where there was the sheriff. No, it was the police chief for the city of Waveland. Was hired by the Attorney General's office to help head up their cybercrime investigations. And we have some folks at MBI that kind of do the same thing. I can also tell you that in talks with the Lieutenant Governor and some others in the legislature, there's interest in bringing in a new department under the Department of Public Safety for cybercrime unit. And so I would fully support that. And really, it's the future of law enforcement. It's like I've talked to some of you about driver's license services, and we've talked about the kiosk. And I think the kiosks are great, but I also think in 5 years they'll be obsolete. And so we got to be looking ahead to what's the next thing, and that's really cybercrime too. And so I think as the head law enforcement agency for the state, we got to be ahead of the curve on that. We have a great program with the Fusion Center underneath the Homeland Security that we actually use for intel and picking up cyber crimes. Those men and women that are over there, I mean, you can't set your ear to the ground because, I mean, they're on those computers picking up all kinds of traffic. And even this last week, as we were dealing with possible protests, people coming in from out of the state, we were really concerned about some out-of-state groups causing problems, and we were constantly monitoring the internet, trying to pick up any chatter that they might have their eyes directed on Mississippi.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a few more questions. I'll remind everybody, we gavel in at 9:45, so I guess that's about 15 minutes from now. So, Senator Fillinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Judge Sindel. I think the governor's made yet another excellent appointment in selecting for this role. I did want to, however, bring your attention to, and I think you've touched on it already a little bit, but in my 21 years of legislative service, probably the most consistent complaint that I have received, and that spans many different administrations, is the Driver's License Bureau, the work that's done there, and not only the time, the delay it takes, sometimes hours and hours to get a, your business handled, whether it's renewing a license, getting a new license, a CDL, whatever, but also the rudeness, just the abject disrespect that some people have encountered at those places of business that the taxpayers pay for, obviously. So I know this was not your problem. You're brand new, haven't even really officially started as the confirmed director, but as you embark upon this journey, I just want to get your thoughts and your concerns maybe about not only the process of getting the licenses issued and renewed and whatnot, but also across the entire Department of Public Safety, the attitude with which our citizens are greeted
Right.
by employees of the DPS.
And, you know, for me, again, I think that's a top-down thing. And I think it's going to be my responsibility to go into, as I've started to do, go into driver's license stations and meet with the people that are working there and show them how I interact. And my expectation will be that they will interact the same. And that's with a level of kindness and respect and a willingness to work to get the job done. Because we are, if you think about it, for the state of Mississippi, driver's license services is the one interaction with the customers, the citizens of the state of Mississippi. It's the one place where they're routinely in there with a state agency interacting. And the way we handle ourselves is important. And I go back to the way I was raised. My family owned a fast food restaurant on the coast. And, you know, I started working there when I was 10 years old. And how you treat customers matter. And it takes one bad interaction to ruin your business, at least the reputation of that business for a while. And quite frankly, it just won't be tolerated. You know, if I get wind of it, yeah, we'll move them on out. With that, I probably need some help because sometimes hiring folks through the personnel board takes a couple of months to fill positions. And really, when it comes to driver's license services, if somebody's out, I got to get somebody back in there quickly because we got to train them on this very complicated computer system and get them ready to go. And we really can't wait a couple of months.
Thank you. And the other question goes to the medical examiners, and I think obviously the pay scale we've talked about for several years in the legislature is probably going to be key in that. But again, we get lots of complaints from DAs, sheriff's departments, and even families when someone's needing an autopsy of some sort performed in order to have final closure for the family and get a burial done. And I've had a few instances, especially here lately, that it's taken over a year to get just a routine autopsy done because of the delays at the medical examiner's office. So could you speak a little more to your plans for that agency?
Well, obviously, we need more medical examiners, and we just hired one on the coast that will serve the Southern District. And she's starting, I think she's already started, is about to start. So that's great. That's going to help tremendously. But I think at some point we got to recognize, all right, maybe we can't pay people as much as some of our neighboring states, and maybe that's why we're losing them, maybe not. And so there might be something else that we can look to, maybe legislatively. Who does all the autopsies? Maybe there's local doctors that we can contract with and rely on their determination as to cause of death, particularly if it's a non-homicidal type event. I mean, sometimes you got to get the autopsy done, but there's really no indication of foul play. So I don't, maybe we can call in somebody from the local hospital, and legislation that would allow us to contract those types of services out to somebody other than a pathologist.
Thank you. Senator McCollum.
Quick question, Mr. Commissioner, I appreciate you coming in today. There's been, and I've been hit up with it, the legislature's been hit up with it in the past, a movement at one point to maybe bring DOT officers under DPS. Any thoughts on that and whether that's a potential for the future, or I know it lays in our hands, but just to not put you on the spot there.
I can tell you this, the folks at DPS, one thing I've noticed, if y'all want us to do it, we'll do it. I'm not going to go out there and fight with transportation to take away their officers, but my ultimate goal, what I would love to see eventually, is that all state law enforcement fall underneath the title of DPS, and so I think that would serve the entire state well, and maybe cut down on some of the costs with training if they were all underneath one umbrella.
Thank you.
Last question, Senator Turner Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning, Senator.
My question relates specifically to the training for law enforcement officers. That does fall under the department that you're seeking to be confirmed. We're aware of all of the protests that have been transpiring throughout this country and others. And my question is, if confirmed, are you willing to look at the courses or the training that law enforcement officers receive, specifically looking for de-escalation techniques? Do we know that that is a course in particular that law enforcement officers are receiving currently?
I can tell you this, before I even resigned from my judgeship, I had taken the time to schedule meetings that first week with all the division heads, which included the Law Enforcement Training Academy. Because we were dealing with driver's license services, that got put off till this week, and I met with Colonel Tullis. I think it's Colonel. Sometimes I get mixed up on the ranks, but he's the head out there, and we discussed that, and I can tell you that I saw it firsthand over the weekend. Highway Patrol was ready to go in case there was any issues in downtown Jackson. They were staged over at the fairgrounds, and MBI agents were in the crowd. From the very beginning, the approach of the Mississippi Department of Public Safety was that of trying to make sure we did not do anything to exacerbate the situation. We were handing out water to folks out there. As you know, the governor offered masks, and so I certainly think that should always be a laudable goal when it comes to these types of situations. As for the training, I certainly think that that's something that needs to be done. I think it's part of all modern law enforcement training, and certainly needs to be a part of ours. I'm pretty sure it is. If it's not, I'll get it there. I can tell you something else that I've been thinking about, and this intertimes with driver's license services. You know, kids take driver's ed course in high school. I'd like to see that expanded, but as part of those driver's education courses, I met with some folks last night about having Highway Patrol come in and do part of the class is time with students talking about interaction with law enforcement, the thought being that, you know, a lot of times the first time people, particularly teenagers, come in contact with law enforcement is an adversarial situation where they get stopped. Well, you know, in order to improve that, if we can start having them come into classes and talk to students and talk about the interaction before it actually happens, it might help some of these situations, particularly when you're talking about roadside stops and the incidents that occur in those situations.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This time, I see a couple people. If there's anybody that would like to say a few words, I see a couple. Senator Polk. Senator Parker.
I think the same thing. You know, we serve together. You know, we do life together. You know, it's been an honor to do some of those things with previous Senator Tindall, and did a great job on the bench. And I expect nothing less from this movement.
And I too will say, I don't think Governor Reeves could have made a better appointment. I think Judge Tindall, people know your heart, having served with you, where you're coming from, and the answers I've heard you say today. Your mind is open to making solutions, and I appreciate that. And I for one, am proud to cast my vote in favor. So that we have a motion. Vice Chairwoman Blackman.
Mr. Chairman, I move that this committee does advise and consent in the appointment of Judge Kendall as Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety.
I'm not going to call it for a vote.
That'll be great.
No, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Advise and consent. Congratulations. It'll go to the.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Please return your peer reports.